Welcome to Travel Market Life, your companion for industry insights and professional business development. Travel Market Life. Join us by webcast, video or podcast.
Hello and welcome to Travel Market Life. I'm your host Ryan Haynes, and today's episode we're going to be looking at AI in travel and hospitality and the ethics behind it.
Travel Market Life.
Joining me now is Emma Taylor, Thematic Analyst, and Nick Wyatt, Head of Research at GlobalData. Hi, thanks ever so much for joining me today. Now, AI is a massive topic in the industry right now. You can't turn to a magazine, a newsletter, social media without actually seeing it in a stream of some kind. So it is a tech of the moment. I'd love to know from you guys, as you're looking at the industry and seeing how they're sort of engaging with this technology, in what ways is it being deployed effectively within travel and hospitality? Nick, I know you've been particularly exploring this.
Yeah, well, first of all, Ryan, thanks for inviting us on. And yeah, you're right, it is the technology of the moment. But I think just to take a step back, I think we have to look at what do we actually mean by AI, because it's quite a catch-all term. We could be looking at things like large language models. We could be looking at other forms of machine learning. We could be looking at computer vision. We could be looking at conversational platforms. So there's a lot going on. And I think that there are examples of where, it is being deployed effectively. And I think the most basic example that we see is where maybe certain repetitive tasks are being sort of automated. And in terms of hospitality, the advantage of that is that you're freeing the sort of staff up to spend time with guests. As we all know, the number one thing you're striving for is a high level of guest satisfaction. That guest experience is at the heart of everything that hotels are doing. That becomes arguably more important the further up the sort of value chain you go within the sort of star rating system, if you like. So I think that is one area we see certain sort of tasks, maybe around check-in, for example, is one, managing bookings, those kinds of things. Using AI in those regards is something we're seeing more of. I think the other element is around personalization, being able to make recommendations either for upsell opportunities on an existing stay or perhaps for, post-stay promotions, individualized promotions after that. Say, okay, we know that from the data we've collected, analyzed, etc., this person stays in this type of room with this view. They've had a tendency for these dining options. Can we now market accordingly? That's something that we've seen. But I think, in terms of sort of the hotel industry specifically, there are, I think, a couple of industries they could learn from. I think we've seen cruise industries do some really interesting things around sort of AI. If you think about something like Ocean Medallion on Princess Cruises, where it's used as, the way somebody pays, it's used as their door key. There's a whole lot of information it can gather on the guest. And I think that's something that hotels are looking to move toward. And the other one I would say is I think there's some really good uses of AI with regards to dynamic pricing in the airlines industry. I think there's a lot that goes on with sort of pricing IQ sort of models within aviation. And I think aviation kind of has sort of set the standard where that sort of form of AI is concerned.
We always sort of look at technology and deployment across the travel and hospitality space. And as you say, where we sort of see the real leadership and innovation is within aviation and how they're sort of drawing on how it's being deployed in other areas like entertainment and retail. And obviously picking up that point there around dynamic pricing, Nick, it's fascinating the power it can offer actually from a personalization perspective and really sort of address some of those points of loyalty and really driving that consumer demand. How far do you feel that the hospitality is actually at reaching that stage? Because I know when we were at the International Hotel Technology Forum, there was a lot of that conversation of, well, the industry isn't just there yet. There's a lot of issues around even just making sure the tech stack is in place and that there are those integrations. Nick, does AI rely heavily on the need to have these systems integrated and data to be shared?
It does, to do it effectively. I think that's the key. I think, collecting data is one thing, then actually doing something meaningful with it and realizing that some of the data doesn't really offer you a whole lot. I think one of the speakers used the analogy, didn't they, that it's like water, in the sense that 70% of the Earth's surface is covered by water. A very small percentage of that is actually fit for consumption, and they said that data is very similar to that. So yes, I think they are. I do think that the hospitality industry has made good strides in this area, and I think that it's interesting you mentioned loyalty, because I think that that's been a driver behind it. Because obviously we've seen hotels want to move more towards direct bookings, so that they're not having to be so reliant on OTAs. Obviously, there are commissions involved in that, etc. Then again, there are then some failings. I mean, I had a conversation with somebody at the conference who was just still completely dumbfounded by the lack of price parity between these platforms. The reason that a lot of people book from OTAs, in this person's view, was they often see it cheaper on there. And they're not going to. It's all well and good a hotel chain saying, well, if you get in touch with us, we'll match it. People are not going to go out of their way to get in touch with you. It has to be there at the point of exploration, at the point of planning. If it's not there, then you've probably lost them. So I do think that it is moving in the right direction. And I think loyalty is a good way of kind of doing it and trying to drive direct bookings. And I think, as with all things, some companies are doing that better than others.
And Emma, I mean, you were giving a presentation at IHTF around the ethical dilemmas of AI. But before we actually address that, what do you see within the industry? Are there quick wins for companies exploring artificial intelligence and the types of benefits that they can be delivered?
Yeah, well, I guess Nick, obviously, just explained a lot of them. Automating a lot of that processes and really freeing up the time of workers in the industry, and creating that better booking experience as well for customers, fostering and increasing that loyalty. I think things like increasing accessibility to customer service, that kind of thing, and just immediately having a 24-hour chatbot that works well. In terms of cybersecurity as well, Nick gave a great talk on cybersecurity at the conference, and AI as well can be used for fraud detection, prevention. I mean, really at every level. I think there are small things that can be automated for operational efficiency and cost cutting even.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess it's about looking at those solutions and identifying where they say the benefits are. But, the big conversation, Emma, that we're having at the moment is around ChatGPT. Now, what kind of use cases do you see for this generative AI, particularly within travel and hospitality? Because that's a big question on everybody's lips. I mean, it creates articles, but how can we use it within the industry right now?
Yeah, definitely. There's such a hype around it, and such a sense of urgency for everyone to really start to deploy something. And I think there are a lot of really valid use cases that I could see for the travel and tourism industry. As I said, with customer service in general. So you could get ChatGPT or another generative AI large language model and integrate that into your hotel's website or an app that would provide 24/7 customer service, or could reply to frequently asked questions about the hotel and the hotel services. And then what we mentioned earlier as well in terms of personalization. So ChatGPT could then be used to recommend room types, suggest nearby attractions, that kind of thing for guests staying at a hotel. And then in terms of operations, so as I said, operational efficiency, I saw one article which explained how you could then integrate it to help with things like housekeeping schedules and inventory management. So then, ChatGPT could sort of send you an alert to let you know when a room needed cleaning. And then, of course, as you mentioned, it can write articles. So in terms of marketing, I can see it working there. And then I think the final thing, which I think is probably one of the most interesting, is in terms of product development. So I think ChatGPT and other models are now creating these generative AI app builders, which mean that people with less technical proficiency can build different platforms than they could have before. So, they could now create bots or chat apps or digital assistants using generative AI instead of needing, so much technical know-how.
I mean, it is fascinating there, just making everything so much simpler and easier and quicker to be able to move things and evolve things much faster. And I certainly saw that Expedia launched a special app that actually relies on ChatGPT to be able to recommend holidays. And it's great to be able to see something that customers can interact with, and really gives ideas, I think, for the travel industry. However, there are concerns over AI and the ethics around it. As we heard a few weeks ago, there was a letter that was co-signed by the likes of Elon Musk and thousands of others demanding a pause in artificial intelligence research, which obviously has created a firestorm. And they asked for a 6-month hiatus on the development of these systems. What I understand about that, it's the focus on the deployment of large language models, which you referred to, and these models which can predict like the next word in a sequence given the preceding words, and the backbone of many of the conversational AI systems. However, the experts are arguing that these models are more powerful than ever before, and they simply don't understand how they work, which is quite scary if the people behind developing them don't understand how they work. What other sort of ethics do we have to be considering, especially to make sure that that it's under control and we know what it's actually delivering for our customers and also, I guess, employees and the larger workforce?
I think there's a lot to unpack there. That's so interesting. I mean, I think with the letter from the different experts, that was a really interesting thing, because I've kind of perceived it that it's not the AI itself which is getting out of control. It's more the arms race over AI. This sort of like one-upping each other constantly, which is getting everyone into a frenzy. I think that's what they need to put the brakes on. It might not be the models themselves, because I think one of the people did describe it as compare it to human intelligence, which is still incredibly far away from. But I think it's definitely right to stop and think before implementing all this type of technology, and really knowing the dangers that come, the potential dangers that come with it, and making sure that you've explored that. So I said in my presentation, you need to think about dangers of misinformation. These models can often conflate fake news with news, fact and fiction, and then produce that at a really alarming level. You've got to think about things like data privacy. So there's been a lot of different articles recently about the data that you then put into these models, where it's then replicated again, especially for the hotel industry. It has a lot of access to really personal data, in terms of copyright as well, and also things like cybercrime. There's a lot of things that need to be considered before rushing to implement these types of things. And I think there's a lot of considerations as well for general AI. So in terms of your data inputs, that's always something that you need to really make sure you've considered your training data, make sure it's diverse, make sure it's large enough, make sure it's representative enough. It's really important to really define your outcome, make sure your model's aligned. There's a lot of different considerations.
So for the hospitality industry, as you say, there's a lot there to unpack, but as there are some really quick wins that you can put into place. Now, the industry as a whole, as we've just covered, sits on a huge amount of data, and there's a lot of discussion really about around sustainability of this data and the impact that it could have on the carbon footprint, as well as on security. And this is an area that you specialize in, Nick, and you've been looking at.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's always fascinated me, the sort of travel industry's relationship with sustainability, because there's always this slightly uneasy marriage of these sort of two ideas, because there are some parts of the industry which just, inherently create a carbon footprint, but there are a lot of things that you can do, to also minimize the impact. And I think the industry has made great strides, but this is a really fascinating one to me with the data centers. And it's something you spoke about actually, Ryan, in this kind of wrap up sort of key takeaways session at the conference. was around this sort of how data is the new oil, and it is in the sense that it can be damaging if we're not careful. That was sort of one of your comments, and it's interesting because you have these huge data centers that are processing all of this information, all of this data. They generate huge amounts of heat. They take lots and lots of energy to run. And then it's kind of, well, how is that energy being generated? Is it clean energy? Is it fossil fuel energy? Those things have to be considered. But then also what I took away from the conference was that there are now some sort of quite ingenious solutions coming of how you can actually then harness the heat that these centers produce.
Who knows what's next? I mean, we have moved so fast in the last decade with technology, and I know there's a lot of catching up to do, even from our own perspectives of what it's capable of. I mean, where for you personally, in your own personal life, do you benefit most, do you think, from AI? Because we've seen it in different entertainment platforms and different payment platforms. But for you, where do you get the most benefit or the most enjoyment?
Oh gosh, that's a really difficult question. Probably in a way that I'm not even aware of, to be honest. It's just used, so prolifically in everything that we do. I think probably a lot of in entertainment, recommender algorithms, I think, are just so astute now. They're really good at recommending exactly what you need and when you need it. Also good at recommending you things that you want and probably don't need. So I'd say that's probably detrimental to my bank balance. But yeah, maybe Netflix. Who knows?
How about yourself, Nick?
Yeah, I would say similar, actually. I think it is the personalization aspect, having sort of things that are recommended to me that do kind of hit the spot of what my interest area is, essentially. And I've had this in all walks. Yes, you've got streaming platforms, music with things like Spotify, also with things like Netflix or Disney Plus, you get it there. But actually, the one that interests me is when you mentioned the ChatGPT Expedia example, because OTAs, I think, are actually quite good at this. They do a lot with this, and they know what to push to you. They know that, this person has booked on mobile devices before. Let's push them a mobile only offer, like you get on something like booking.com, for example. So I actually would say that, that kind of recommender piece. But to me, I've very much got a keen eye on that sort of that planning stage of a trip. Use of large language models, I think, is really interesting, because the way that Expedia explains it, if I remember correctly, when I read their statement when they launched this, is that they actually describe it as you can have an open-ended conversation with the platform. But then, that sounds really great. But that brings in your point then, Ryan, about the diversity element. You need to make sure it's not leaning on misconceptions, mistruths, kind of lazy tropes about certain destinations, certain attractions, etc., because that then risks becoming a negative and steering people away from those areas based on not a lot. But yeah, for me, I would say it's the recommender platforms, and that, to me, as I say, I think OTAs are an area I've definitely got an eye on with this, because I think it could be fascinating to see what they do.
Yeah, I guess you've got to make it fun, haven't you? I mean, I saw last year that an OTA launched like a Tinder-style matching holiday matchmaker, and it's based on your intent and preferences, and it was just brilliant. Swipe left, swipe right. Oh my God, this is everything that I'm particularly interested in.
Yeah, so, but it's interesting, because I think that came up at the conference, didn't it? People talk about gamifying certain things to make it, because it aids engagement with the platform, essentially. But I guess the final piece where maybe I would like to see more done that came up at the conference, which I thought was really interesting, was on that sustainability piece, and how, this has gone on for years. You get the sort of sign in the hotel room, oh, you help out a lot if you don't, have your towels washed every day and all this kind of thing. But is there a way of tying that to loyalty schemes, for example? Is there a way of how can you actually properly incentivize the guest to engage in those things, to engage in those sustainability measures? It could be anything from water usage to food wastage. But I think that idea of maybe linking it to some sort of reward system, which could be loyalty points, I think is an interesting one. And it will, again, be interesting to see whether they go down that road of using AI to maybe then start to link it to that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, it'll be interesting to see all those use cases that start to come out, and I'd definitely be looking at exploring those here on Travel Market Life. So Emma, Nick, thank you ever so much for your time today, and actually giving us that insight to how the industry is using AI and some of the challenges to watch out for, as well as the ethical dilemmas. It's been insightful.
Oh, thank you so much for having us.
No problem. Hope to speak to you soon. So that was Emma Taylor, the Thematic Analyst at GlobalData, along with her colleague Nick Wyatt, Head of Research, talking about AI in travel and hospitality and the ethics behind it. For more podcast episodes, check out Travel Market Live across all the podcast channels. Subscribe to our newsletter on LinkedIn. Thanks for listening, and look out for the next episode. Ciao for now.
For more, go to Travel Market Life. The music sensation by Zach Nelson is reproduced under license from Storyblocks. Travel Market Life is a Haynes Marcoms digital marketing agency production, serving the travel and technology industries.